Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, here in New York City. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening if you're pursuing this general session out there on the World Wide Web via Syscon TV. As promised, next general session, hard, quick change, PerspecSys next, security. I love the title of this one, Taming the Cloud Beast. Quick instruction that green is forward. And that's about it, because you're only going to go forward, David. David Canellos.
Can't go backwards.
President and CEO of PerspecSys. Last general session of the day. Grace this audience with your wisdom, sir.
We'll try. Thank you, Jeremy, and good afternoon, everybody. Again, I'm David Canellos of PerspecSys, and today we're going to talk about the cloud, but specifically we're going to talk about the cloud in relationship to security and some of the challenge that we see in the industry. So just a real brief overview of what we're going to discuss today, some industry observations, the barrier to adoption, specific industries that are looking to create ways for organizations to protect information that, again, creates somewhat of a barrier for adoption of cloud. We'll talk about some of the market requirements that we're seeing in the industry and an alternative approach, and certainly want to make this as interactive as possible. I know with a larger sort of room like this, it's difficult, but if anybody has any question or comment, certainly feel free to stop me. So just a real quick overview. Who's PerspecSys? We're a company that really helps organizations in the public sector, in the private sector, across multiple verticals. Organizations who otherwise would like to move to cloud applications, adopt SaaS applications. However, these organizations are reluctant to do so due to data privacy, data residency, and data security. And if you look at the industry research from Gartner and Forrester and others, you'll see that this is often cited by businesses as the top inhibitor to adopting cloud. The question really becomes, do I want to put my customer information, my financial information, employee information, legal information, my intellectual property into a public cloud? Who can see it? Who's got access to it? How do I keep it under control? And so with PerspecSys, we've developed a software solution. It's a proxy server, for those who are interested, that essentially sits between the user of the application and the cloud, and intercepts the transactions. And that information that's deemed sensitive, we go ahead and, based on the user's requirements, put replacement values into the cloud in either the form of token values, which are randomly generated, or encrypted values. And we'll talk about that shortly. The most important thing is that the functionality of the cloud application is preserved. The end user, to them, we're invisible. And so the organization has control of its sensitive information, but at the same time is allowing themselves the benefit of cloud computing. And I'm sure you guys have heard some of the sessions this week. Cloud computing benefits can range anywhere from 5x to 10x versus on-premise solutions. So NIST, has everyone heard about NIST? I think it's well known, National Institute of Standards and Technology, really the de facto standards body out there that has been around for years looking at certain technology standards. And you can see here recently they published a paper on the guidelines for security and privacy, and they say that with the various types of security and privacy laws across different countries, and we're going to talk about this, it's making it very complicated for organizations to adopt cloud computing. We've written white papers, and we'll share some of that information with you on the various regulations and privacy laws each country has. Global privacy. This is the paper. So if you guys have a chance, come by the PerspecSys booth. We have white papers on data privacy laws across the country, all countries. So we've examined them, and in certain areas like Switzerland and Germany, where the privacy laws are more demanding, we've actually expanded that into its own white paper. And the issue is if you see these different privacy laws, some examples, Swiss banking privacy law. Swiss banking privacy law says no customer information can leave the border of Switzerland. So if you are a Swiss bank doing business in Switzerland, how do you go to the cloud if that cloud happens to be hovering over North America? And knowing that for each customer record that leaves the border of Switzerland, it's a 20,000 Swiss franc fine. Well, we have customers today using PerspecSys that are able to use, for example, Salesforce, but keep all the customer personally identifiable information inside of Switzerland. So they're enjoying the benefits, yet they're complying with the privacy law. Germany has a very demanding privacy law as well. In their case, it could be up to $500,000 or more if there is a breach of customer information that leaves Germany. So the point here is that there are different privacy laws all over the world, and many are in contradiction with each other. One example we like to give is you have an analyst in Germany who is doing research on EU consumer buying habits, accessing cloud application where the data center is hosted in Malaysia, India, and the US. Well, what data privacy law is under jurisdiction in this case? Is it Germany? Is it the US, Malaysia, India, more broadly the EU? It's probably yes, yes, and yes. And if you read our papers here, you'll see that there's contradiction in some of these data protection laws. And then, of course, the one that everyone talks about is the Patriot Act, the US Patriot Act, which says we can go ahead and seize information, and that information is seized on the basis of national security requirements. And oh, by the way, you can't inform any of your customers, where the EU Data Protection Directive says the opposite, or saying the opposite, which is you need to inform customers that their information has been seized. So you're starting to see these collisions, if you will, of these privacy laws. IDC recently did a survey of 1,000 different companies in Europe commissioned on behalf of the EU, and they were half large businesses, half were small, medium businesses. And it was looking at cloud and the adoption of cloud, and what are the barriers to adoption. First one is 24% respondents said, I don't know where my data is located. Who has control of my data? The next one is data access and portability. One of the things we're seeing, and we've talked about this in some of the sessions, is the cloud is intended to be a utility, right? Like electricity, like pay TV, like wireless services, etc. You should be able to go from one provider to another. Well, what's happening is with the data being locked into some of these cloud providers, it's hard to extract that data and move to another provider. Trust. Does my cloud provider have the sufficient security measures in place in order to protect my information? 31% said security and data protection, and that's really, is my data guaranteed to be protected? And if you look at the T's and C's, the terms and conditions of the relationships you have with your cloud service providers, what you'll see is they'll say, as long as it's within the data center, they'll go ahead and indemnify you if there's a breach. But as soon as that data is in flight, accessed by your users, whether it's on a smartphone, tablet, PC, anywhere in the world, they're no longer liable. The customer's liable. And I think I see heads shaking, so I think a lot of folks recognize that. And of course, legal jurisdiction is the one I just talked about earlier, which is 32%. Under what legal jurisdiction am I bound for data privacy? Gartner recently said something similar about the US market, which is cloud providers will become a target for attack. And why is that? It's because of data aggregation. Attackers, the hacker mentality, the cyber criminal is looking for large, juicy targets. Think of global payments, Heartland payments. Think of LinkedIn. Anyone have a LinkedIn account? Everyone knows what's happened there, right? 6 million passwords were hacked. So these aggregation of data, in fact, the funny thing about LinkedIn that I found out in one of the articles, which was interesting, was that they didn't have a CIO or a CISO. So I don't know how many users of LinkedIn there are. There are hundreds of million, I suppose. But here's LinkedIn, that sort of grew up, in the social media age with this sort of frictionless environment, and they don't have a CIO or CISO. I think that's probably changed now. Anyways, Gartner goes on to say that it's going to be critical to evaluate cloud services for their ability to resist and be resilient to security attacks. And again, that theme is the one that we see important. So let's talk about some of the industry compliances that are playing a role. Folks recognize some of these? So PCI, certainly there is credit card information that we have a customer, for example, that was dinged by their QSA and they failed an audit for having certain credit card information in the public cloud, and they were getting fined. And so as a result, they had to look for an alternative solution to stay with the cloud application, but conform to PCI DSS. HIPAA, personal health information, 18 sensitive fields. If you're a healthcare provider, those fields need to be closely guarded. You cannot put that information recklessly into a public cloud. ITAR, which basically says anything on the U.S. munition list cannot be viewed by a foreign national. Banking has its own FERPA, Sarbanes-Oxley, etc. So industry compliance is also playing a role in inhibiting cloud adoption. So sort of bringing this all home, what are the 3 core issues to be addressed? So we talked about residency, data residency, right? Which is residency of a particular country, and it's not just in Europe, folks. It's in Asia as well. We're getting called by, we got called recently by a company in ANZ that said we had to turn off our SaaS application because we realized we weren't within compliance with local jurisdiction laws for data privacy. And so all of a sudden, hundreds of users were now without a customer relationship management solution because this company figured out that they were not in compliance with policy. Industry compliance, we talked about that. The third issue to be addressed is third-party obligations. And that is one where government goes ahead and works with companies on their behalf, providing services to citizens. And these companies get licenses and information from government. And they have to, under the relationship they have with government, to protect and closely guard citizen information. So this is another one of these areas of, if you have this issue, how can you take advantage of the cloud? That's where we come in, PerspecSys. So what we've done is we've created this, as I mentioned earlier, this platform, if you will, this cloud gateway platform. And really what it does is it intercepts transactions from your end users to the cloud and ensures that any of the sensitive data is either tokenized or it's encrypted. And I think what's most important here is what we're hearing from the market is large enterprises, large public sector organizations wish to move to the cloud. They need cloud data protection solutions, but what they're asking for are platforms, because they don't want to just protect one cloud application. They want to protect a range of cloud applications, in some cases dozens of cloud applications. And so what we're doing at PerspecSys is we're making sure that we're aligning ourselves with those requirements, which is around a platform, so that when a customer changes a policy, let's say personally identifiable information now includes a certain element. Let's say it's, I don't know, account number. Instead of going to a dozen different cloud applications and making that change, organizations want a single place that they can go ahead and manage and change that policy for a consistency across all their applications. So if account number happens to be